Welcome to this deep dive.
Good to be here.
Today we're exploring a really short work, but it's incredibly profound, isn't it? James Allen's As a Man Thinketh.
It absolutely is. It's one of those foundational texts.
Yeah,
And it centers on this idea that feels, well, both simple and just huge right there in the title.
the connection.
Yeah, the direct connection between our inner world, our thoughts, and our outer reality, the lives we actually experience.
Exactly. So our mission here is to take Allen's core principles,
Dig into them.
unpack them, and really try to understand how this classic perspective suggests we might actually have the power to shape our circumstances, our health, even our destiny.
Just by mastering our thinking. That's the claim.
Right. So how does Allen propose our thoughts are this fundamental, this powerful? Where does he even begin?
Well, he gets straight to the heart of it. He opens with that famous aphorism, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he."
And he means that literally.
Pretty much, yeah. Allen interprets it quite literally. He says a man is basically the complete sum of all his thoughts, your character, everything you are right now.
It's just crystallized thought.
That's the idea, the result of what you've consistently thought over time.
And he uses that analogy from nature, right? The seed analogy.
He does, yeah. It's a great one. Just like a plant grows from this, hidden seed, every single action we take.
Whether we mean to or not.
Right, whether it seems spontaneous or it's totally deliberate, it originates from these little thought seeds we've planted inside.
Okay, so thoughts are the seeds, actions are the blossoms. What about the consequences, the results in life?
Those are the fruits. He puts it very poetically. Act is the blossom of thought, and joy and suffering are its fruits.
So you're harvesting.
You are, in his view, actively garnering in the sweet and bitter fruitage of your own husbandry. Basically, yeah, you're harvesting the results of how you've tended your inner garden, your mind.
It's like saying your thoughts are the farming, and your life is the harvest you get. No escaping it.
Precisely. And importantly, this isn't random. Allen really emphasizes that man is a growth by law, not some kind of creation by artifice.
Meaning there's cause and effect.
Absolutely. Just as reliable in the realm of thought, he argues, as it is in the physical world.
So your character, whether you see yourself as noble or maybe, as he puts it, ignoble, that's not just luck of the draw.
No, not according to Allen. It's the natural result of the continued effort you put into thinking, either in a right direction or, well, a wrong one. It's the buildup of your thought habits.
Which puts the responsibility squarely on us.
Absolutely. He states it very clearly. Man is made or unmade by himself, and the tool he uses is thought.
The tool of thought.
Yeah. And he can use that tool to, climb higher or, conversely, descend into lower states.
That's the really powerful, almost kind of startling truth Allen presents, isn't it? That man is the master of thought, the molder of character, and the maker and shaper of condition, environment, and destiny.
It's a massive claim. But he qualifies it a bit. He says man is always the master, even when he feels weak or lost.
How does that work?
Well, when he's weak, he's the foolish master, just drifting. He only becomes the wise master when he starts to deliberately reflect on his inner state, actively search for the law upon which his being is established.
The rules of thought.
Exactly, the principles governing thought. And then consciously directs his mental energy with intelligence.
And you have to find this law. It's not just obvious.
No, it comes, Allen says, through application, self-analysis, and experience. You have to do the work.
Sounds like digging deep.
Yeah, he talks about much searching and mining into the mine of his soul, looking inward, really looking.
So conscious effort is required.
Definitely. And this law he talks about is absolute. He echoes that biblical idea.
Right.
He that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened.
Improving it for yourself means.
It requires actively watching your thoughts, controlling them, altering them, and then tracing their effects in your actual life, linking cause and effect through, as he puts it, patient practice and investigation.
So every experience becomes data.
Exactly. A chance to gain self-knowledge, which he equates directly with understanding, wisdom, and ultimately power.
Okay, so inner thoughts shape character, shape actions. Got it. How does Allen then explain the link to our external life, our circumstances, the stuff that happens to us?
Right. This is key. He brings in another really vivid analogy here. The mind as a garden.
A garden.
Yeah. The mind has to produce something, right? It'll bring forth something, whether you actively cultivate it or just let it go wild. If you don't deliberately plant useful seeds.
Then weeds will just pop up on their own.
Exactly. Useless weed seeds will inevitably fall in there and just flourish if there's nothing else growing.
So, just like a gardener tending a plot.
Precisely. A person can consciously tend the garden of their mind. You can weed out the wrong, the useless, the impure thoughts,
Hold 'em.
and actively cultivate the right, useful, pure ones, working towards, ideally, a state of mental perfection or at least improvement.
Sounds like constant work. Mental discipline.
It is. And through this ongoing effort, Alan says, a person eventually discovers they are the master gardener of his soul, the true director of their own life.
So you start to see the rules.
You reveal the laws of thought within yourself and understand, through your own experience, how they consistently operate to shape not just your character, but also your circumstances and, yeah, ultimately, your destiny.
So the outer conditions, they aren't random. They're like a mirror.
That's exactly Alan's argument. He states that thought and character are basically one and the same, and our outer conditions are harmoniously related to his inner state.
Harmoniously related. Even the bad stuff.
That's the tricky part. He argues circumstances are intimately connected with some vital thought element within himself. And maybe surprisingly, he suggests that for the time being, those circumstances are actually indispensable to his development.
Wow. Okay, that's a challenging perspective. That even difficult, painful circumstances are somehow linked to us internally, and we need them.
It is challenging. He flat out asserts, every man is where he is by the law of his being. The thoughts which he has built into his character have brought him there.
No element of chance.
And in the arrangement of his life, there is no element of chance, but all is the result of a law which cannot err. And he adds, this holds true even if you feel totally out of harmony with where you are right now.
Because you're there to learn something specific.
Exactly. As a progressive and evolving being, you are, in Alan's view, in exactly the right place, the right situation to learn that you may grow.
And once you learn the lesson.
He suggests that once you fully grasp the lesson embedded in that circumstance, the circumstance itself naturally passes away. It's no longer needed.
That definitely reframes feeling like a victim of your environment.
It totally flips the script. You're buffeted by circumstances, he says, only so long as he believes himself to be the creature of outside conditions.
But when you realize
you're actually a creative power, capable of commanding the hidden soil and seeds of his being out of which circumstances grow, then you start moving towards mastery.
How does Alan suggest someone can, prove this to themselves? It sounds quite abstract.
He says the proof is in the practice, diligent practice. Anyone who's really committed to self-control and self-purification, he claims, will have noticed that changes in their circumstances happen in exact ratio with his altered mental condition.
So inner change leads to outer change directly.
That's the claim. Significant inner progress means you'll pass rapidly through a whole series of vicissitude, tough experiences, challenges, like you're clearing out old patterns.
So the soul attracts what it holds inside. Fears, loves.
Yes, exactly. The soul attracts what it secretly harbors, the things it truly loves, the things it deeply fears, its cherished goals, its unchecked desires. Circumstances, Alan believes, are just the means by which the soul receives its own.
The external result of the internal state.
Precisely. Every single thought seed, whether you planted it on purpose or just kind of let it fall into your mind, produces its own specific harvest of opportunity and circumstance. Good thoughts, good fruit. Bad thoughts, bad fruit. Simple as that, in his view.
So the outer world isn't just passive, it actively molds itself to our inner world.
That's the core of his argument here. And he sees both the pleasant stuff and the unpleasant conditions as ultimately serving a purpose. They make for the ultimate good, he says.
How so?
Because man learns vital lessons through both suffering and bliss. You're always the reaper of his own harvest. Whether you follow impure imaginings or strive for high endeavor, you eventually see them bear fruit in your outer life. The natural laws of growth and adjustment are always, always working.
This really goes against the idea of just being fated to certain outcomes.
Absolutely challenges it. Alan argues very forcefully that a man doesn't end up poor or in jail because of some external fate, but by walking the pathway of groveling thoughts and base desires.
And the reverse is true, too.
Yes. A pure-minded person doesn't just suddenly fall into crime. That criminal thought, he suggests, was secretly nurtured within for a long time. He makes that really powerful statement. Circumstance does not make the man, it reveals him to himself.
Meaning you don't experience, say, vice or suffering unless you've got those tendencies inside you already.
Exactly. Nor, he argues, do you experience virtue or happiness without actively cultivating the corresponding virtuous aspirations internally. Man, as the master of thought, is presented as the maker of himself, the shaper and author of environment.
Even from birth.
Even the conditions a soul is born into, he suggests, reflect its own state, its purity or impurity, its strength or weakness, attracting circumstances that match its inherent nature.
Okay, this brings us to one of maybe the most quoted lines from the book, right?
It really is striking. Allen states, men do not attract that which they want, but that which they are.
Oof, that's direct.
It is. He makes a distinction between our fleeting whims, our fancies, our surface ambitions, those might get thwarted. But our inmost thoughts and desires, he says, are inevitably fed with their own appropriate food, the circumstances that match them.
He quotes something about divinity.
Yeah. The divinity that shapes our ends is in ourselves. It is our very self. And that unforgettable line, only himself manacles man. Thought and action are the jailers of fate they imprison, being base. They are also the angels of freedom they liberate, being noble.
So it's not about wishing, it's about earning through your inner state.
That's his position entirely. Your wishes and prayers, he suggests, only come true when they genuinely harmonize with his thoughts and actions. If your inner world and outer actions align with your desires, then you attract them.
What does Allen mean then when he talks about people fighting against circumstances? What's happening there?
He says that describes someone who's constantly battling against an effect, their difficult situation, while at the same time they're nourishing and preserving its cause in his heart.
The internal cause.
Right. It could be a conscious vice, something they know is wrong, or maybe just an unconscious weakness they haven't dealt with. But Allen argues that inner cause stubbornly holds back any real outward progress. It's a sign that internal change is needed.
And is that why people often feel stuck, like they can't improve things?
He certainly suggests it's a major reason. He observes, men are anxious to improve their circumstances, but are unwilling to improve themselves. They therefore remain bound.
Ouch.
Yeah. The only way out, he argues, is through what he calls self-crucifixion, which sounds harsh, but basically means being willing to sacrifice those lower thoughts and desires that are the root cause of the difficulty.
And this applies everywhere. Earthly success, spiritual goals.
He believes so. Even just seeking wealth, he notes, requires significant personal sacrifices of time, of focus, maybe of certain comforts. You have to give something up internally to gain externally.
He uses some specific examples to really drive this home.
Yes, he does. He talks about the poor man who's also dishonest, shirks his work,
And attracts deeper poverty.
because his thoughts are lazy and deceptive. Or the rich man suffering illness from gluttony who's totally unfit to have health because he won't sacrifice his harmful desires.
And the employer using shady practices.
The employer using crooked measures, underpaying people, who then finds himself bankrupt. He blames circumstances, but Allen says he's the sole author of his condition.
So these just illustrate how we are, often unconsciously, the creators of our own problems.
Exactly. We undermine our own good intentions by holding on to thoughts and desires that are fundamentally out of sync with the outcomes we want. Now, Allen does acknowledge it's complex.
Right, it's not always simple to see.
Circumstances can seem tangled, thought runs deep, happiness looks different for different people. He specifically warns against judging someone's entire inner state just by looking at their external life.
Because an honest person might suffer.
Right, maybe they have other hidden vices or weaknesses they haven't conquered, and a dishonest person might seem to prosper.
Perhaps they have other virtues like diligence.
Exactly. Or sharp focus, or determination. Superficial judgment, Allen says, is always wrong because everyone is reaping the results of their own unique mix of thoughts and actions.
And he suggests just human vanity to assume our suffering is only because we're so virtuous.
He does. He argues you can only truly know if your suffering comes purely from your virtues when you're incredibly close to supreme perfection, which is rare.
So along the way.
Along the path of growth, you start to see through experience that the great law, which is absolutely just, is always operating. Good for good, evil for evil. Your past life, he suggests looking back, was actually justly ordered. Your experiences were the equitable outworking of his evolving yet unevolved self, a fair reflection of where you were internally at that time.
It comes back to that farming idea, corn from corn, nettles from nettles.
Right. Good thoughts and actions simply cannot produce bad results, and bad ones can't produce good ones. He notes that people understand this principle in nature easily enough,
But struggle to apply it mentally and morally.
Yeah, and that's why they often feel like they're fighting against a fundamental law instead of working with it.
And suffering in this whole framework is always a sign that something's off internally.
Yes, suffering, for Alan, is always an effect of wrong thought in some area. It indicates you're out of harmony with the underlying law of your being.
Yet its purpose.
Its only purpose, he argues, is to purify, to burn away what's useless or impure in your thinking. Suffering, therefore, ceases for the pure because they are in perfect harmony.
So circumstances with suffering come from mental inharmony.
And circumstances that bring blessedness come from mental harmony. But he's careful here. Blessedness, in his view, is the measure of right thought, not necessarily how much stuff you have.
Okay.
And wretchedness is the measure of wrong thought, not necessarily a lack of possessions. You can be rich and blessed if you use your riches rightly and wisely. A poor person is wretched, in Alan's view, mainly when they see their situation as an unfair burden rather than a result or a lesson.
He calls both extreme poverty and extreme indulgence forms of wretchedness.
Yes, both indigence and indulgence are seen as unnatural states stemming from mental disorder. The ideal, the right condition, according to Alan, is to be happy, healthy, and prosperous, which is the natural outcome of a harmonious adjustment of the inner with the outer. Your inner state is aligned with beneficial outer results.
Becoming a true man, then, in his terms, sounds like really stepping up and taking full responsibility for your inner world.
It absolutely is. He argues a person only truly begins to mature when they cease to whine and revile and commence to search for the hidden justice which regulates his life.
Stop blaming.
Stop blaming others. Start adapting your own mind to this underlying regulating factor. Consciously build yourself up with strong, noble thoughts. Learn to see challenging circumstances as aids for growth, and discover your own hidden inner powers and possibilities.
So the universe isn't out to get you, it's just operating by principles, and you need to get in sync.
That's the perspective, yes. Law, justice, righteousness. These are presented as the fundamental shaping forces. Man has but to right himself to find that the universe is right. It's quite profound.
And as you change your thoughts about things and people,
He claims things, and people will actually alter towards you in response. It's quite remarkable when you experience it.
and this proof, he says, isn't some mystical secret, it's accessible.
Yes, he argues it's easy for anyone to investigate through basic introspection and self-analysis. Radically change your thought patterns, he challenges, and you'll be astonished at how quickly it leads to a transformation in the material conditions of your life.
It seems like you can't really keep a thought hidden for long then, can you?
No, he says thought cannot be kept secret. It rapidly crystallizes into habit, and habit solidifies into circumstance. He gives quite a list of these chains.
Like negative thoughts leading to negative outcomes.
Exactly. Hateful or condemnatory thoughts solidify into habits of accusation or violence, which then attract circumstances of injury or persecution. Selfish thoughts lead to self-seeking habits, creating distressing circumstances.
Fear and doubt?
Fear, doubt, indecision lead to weak, irresolute habits and circumstances of failure, dependence, even indigence. Lazy thoughts solidify into habits of uncleanliness or dishonesty, attracting foulness and beggary.
But the positive thought patterns follow the same mechanism.
Absolutely. Beautiful thoughts crystallize into habits of grace and kindliness, attracting genial, sunny circumstances. Pure thoughts lead to temperance and self-control, solidifying into circumstances of repose and peace.
Courage, self-reliance.
Courage, self-reliance, decision, these lead to manly habits and circumstances of success, plenty, and freedom. Loving and unselfish thoughts solidify into habits of self-forgetfulness and attract what he calls abiding prosperity and true riches.
So a thought you really hold on to, good or bad, will produce tangible results.
That's his inescapable conclusion for this section. You can't directly choose your circumstances, perhaps, but you can choose your thoughts. And by doing that, you indirectly, yet surely, shape your circumstances.
And nature even helps.
Nature, he suggests, actually cooperates to help bring both your good and bad thoughts into reality by presenting opportunities that align with whatever thoughts you're encouraging most strongly.
So if you get rid of, say, sinful or harmful thoughts, the world seems to soften towards you.
That's the idea he presents. Put away weak thoughts, and opportunities arise to help you build strength. Encourage good thoughts, and no hard fate can keep you bound in misery. He uses one last beautiful analogy here.
The kaleidoscope.
Yes. The world you experience is like your own personal kaleidoscope. The shifting combinations of life, the events, the people, are just the exquisitely adjusted pictures of your ever-moving thoughts. He then ends this part with a really powerful poem, emphasizing the spirit's power, the will's power, to master environment.
Okay, thoughts shape character. Thoughts shape circumstances. How does Allen extend this powerful principle to our physical health?
Allen is very direct here, too. He states quite plainly, the body is the servant of the mind. It obeys the operations of the mind,
Whether we choose those operations or not?
whether they be deliberately chosen or automatically expressed. So yes, your mental activity directly impacts your physical state.
And the impact is significant.
He claimed it's profound. Unlawful thoughts, negative or harmful thoughts, can lead the body rapidly into disease and decay, while conversely, glad and beautiful thoughts can actually clothe it with youthfulness and beauty.
So health and disease have roots in thought. That's a strong claim.
It is. He states that sickly thoughts will inevitably express themselves through a sickly body. He points to common experiences like the effect of fear.
Fear can make you sick.
Yes, he says fear will kill the body with rapidity, sometimes like a bullet, sometimes surely but slowly. He observes that people who live in constant fear of a particular disease are often the ones who end up getting it.
And anxiety. That wears you down physically.
Definitely. He says it quickly demoralizes the entire body, lowering its defenses, making it susceptible to illness. And similarly, impure thoughts, even if you never act on them outwardly, can, he suggests, actually shatter the nervous system over time.
But positive thinking has the opposite effect. Builds health.
Fundamentally, yes. Strong, pure, happy thoughts, he claims, actively build up the body in vigor and grace. He describes the body as this delicate and plastic instrument that readily responds to whatever thought impressions are made upon it. Our habitual ways of thinking, good or bad, produce real, tangible physical effects.
So purity of thought is also key for physical purity, a healthy body.
He connects them very intimately. He states flatly that people will continue to have impure, poisoned blood, for example, as long as they harbor unclean thoughts.
Clean heart, clean body.
That's the principle. Out of a clean heart comes a clean life and a clean body. A defiled mind, in his view, inevitably leads to a defiled life and a corrupted body. He really stresses that thought is the fount, the source. You have to make the source pure.
He even brings us down to things like diet and hygiene.
Yeah, it's interesting. He suggests that just changing your diet won't truly fix things if you don't also change your thoughts. When your thoughts become pure, he argues, the craving for impure food naturally lessens.
And cleanliness?
Clean thoughts lead naturally to clean habits. He makes a strong statement. A so-called saint who neglects basic physical cleanliness is not a saint. And interestingly, he adds that people whose thoughts are truly purified don't need to live in fear of things like microbes. Their inner state provides a kind of protection.
There's a very holistic, integrated view of thought's power.
He sums up this section with two really clear directives. If you would protect your body, guard your mind. If you would renew your body, beautify your mind.
Even our facial expressions become a map of our thoughts.
According to Allen, yes. Malice, envy, disappointment, despondency, these negative states, he claims, literally rob the body of its health and grace. A sour face doesn't just happen, it's made by sour thoughts.
And wrinkles.
The wrinkles which mar a face, he believes, are drawn there by folly, passion, and pride over time.
He offers some vivid contrasts to illustrate this point.
He does. He mentions knowing a woman who was 96, yet her face remained bright and innocent, like a young girl's. He attributes this directly to her sweet and sunny disposition.
And the opposite.
In stark contrast, he describes a man well under middle age whose face was already deeply marked by inharmonious contours, which Allen saw as the clear result of uncontrolled passion and discontent. You can distinguish, he says, between aged faces marked by wrinkles of sympathy and pure thought versus those carved by harsh passion.
He even mentions a philosopher.
Yeah, a philosopher who, though not particularly old in years, apparently died sweetly and peacefully because he lived righteously, suggesting his mental state influenced his physical end.
It really sounds like your inner state is the best possible medicine.
He literally says, there is no physician like cheerful thought for dissipating the ills of the body. There is no comforter to compare with goodwill for dispersing the shadows of grief and sorrow.
So living in negative thought patterns is like building your own prison.
Ill will, cynicism, suspicion, envy. Allen sees dwelling in these as creating a self-made prison hole. Absolutely.
And the way out.
Thinking well of everyone, maintaining cheerfulness, patiently looking for the good in all situations, these, he says, are the very portals of heaven. And dwelling day by day in peace toward every creature, he concludes, brings abounding peace to the person who practices it.
Okay, moving from the physical body, how does Allen connect this master key of thought with purposeful action, with actually achieving things in the world?
He states it very directly. Until thought is linked with purpose, there is no intelligent accomplishment. Simple as that.
No purpose, no real achievement.
Right. Without a central purpose guiding your thoughts, he believes, the vast majority of people just let the bark of thought, as he calls it, drift aimlessly on the ocean of life.
And he sees that aimlessness as a serious problem.
A very significant one. He actually calls aimlessness a vice that inevitably leads toward catastrophe and destruction.
Wow. Strong words.
Yeah. Having no central purpose leaves you vulnerable, an easy target for petty worries, baseless fears, constant troubles, self-pity, all of which, in his view, are just signs of fundamental weakness.
And weakness doesn't survive.
Weakness, he points out, cannot persist in a power-evolving universe. It naturally leads to failure, unhappiness, loss. It just can't hold its own.
So how do you take the helm? How do you steer that bark?
Well, a person, he says, needs to conceive a legitimate purpose in his heart, something meaningful they genuinely set out to accomplish.
Doesn't have to be huge.
It could be a high spiritual ideal, or it could be a more immediate worldly objective. The key thing is to make that purpose the centralizing point of his thoughts. You have to steadily focus your mental energy, your thought forces, on achieving that goal.
Which requires real concentration, devotion even.
Yes. Allen advises making this purpose your supreme duty. Devote yourself entirely to achieving it. Actively stop your thoughts from wandering off into fleeting daydreams or vague longings. This conscious discipline, he suggests, is the royal road to self-control and true concentration of thought.
What if you face setbacks? If you fail along the way, does that mean the purpose was wrong?
Not at all, according to Allen. He says even if you fail repeatedly while striving, which, he notes, you almost have to do until your inner weaknesses are overcome, the strength of character gained will be the measure of his true success.
So failure becomes a stepping stone.
Exactly. Each failure, if you meet it bravely and learn from it, forms a new, stronger starting point for future power and eventual triumph.
What about someone who feels like they don't really have a great purpose right now?
That's a good point. For those not yet ready for what he calls a great purpose, Allen gives simpler advice. Just fix your thoughts on the faultless performance of their duty, no matter how small or insignificant that duty might seem.
Just focus on doing your current job well.
Precisely. He suggests that even this simple focus helps gather and concentrate your thoughts. It develops those crucial qualities of resolution and energy. And once you have those, he says, there is nothing which may not be accomplished.
So developing mental strength is like physical training, a process.
Exactly the analogy he uses. The weakest soul, once it knows its weakness but believes strength comes from effort and practice, will begin to exert itself. Add effort to effort, patience to patience, strength to strength, and that soul will develop and grow divinely strong.
Like lifting weights for the mind.
Just like the physically weak person trains their body, the person with weak thoughts must exercise themselves in right thinking to make their thoughts strong.
And putting away that aimlessness, that weakness, is how you join the ranks of the strong ones.
Yes, that's how he frames it. Those are the people who see failure only as a pathway to attainment, who learn to make all circumstances serve their purpose, and who, as a result, think strongly, attempt fearlessly, and accomplish masterfully.
And you need a clear mental path forward.
You have to mentally mark out that straight pathway towards your goal. Allen is really insistent that doubts and fears must be rigorously excluded.
Why? What do they do?
He sees them as disintegrating elements. They break the straight line of effort, make it crooked, wandering, ineffective. Thoughts of doubt and fear, he states flatly, have never accomplished anything worthwhile, and they never can. They always lead to failure.
They sound like the opposite of real willpower.
They are. Allen says, the will to do springs from the knowledge that we can do. Doubt and fear are the great enemies of that knowledge. If you encourage them, you sabotage yourself every step of the way.
So conquering doubt and fear is fundamental.
He says it's literally how you conquer failure itself. When your thoughts are allied with a sense of power, difficulties are met bravely and overcome wisely. Purposes, he believes, when planted seasonably in a mind free of fear, will bloom and bear fruit that doesn't fall prematurely. He finishes this section with a really powerful declaration.
Which is?
Thought allied fearlessly to purpose becomes creative force. Knowing this truth means you're ready to become something more, something higher and stronger than just, a bundle of wavering thoughts and fluctuating feelings. And by actively doing this, you become, in his words, the conscious and intelligent wielder of his mental powers.
Building on that idea of purpose, what does Allen see as the ultimate thought factor behind all kinds of achievement? Success in any area.
He states it as an absolute universal principle. All that a man achieves and all that he fails to achieve is the direct result of his own thoughts. Period.
Which makes individual responsibility just
In a justly ordered universe, Allen believes individual responsibility must be absolute. Your weakness, your strength, your purity, your impurity, they are entirely your own, brought about by you. And they can only be altered by you.
Your condition is your own making.
Your condition is your own. Your suffering, your happiness, they evolved from within you. His very concise summary is, as he thinks, so he is. As he continues to think, so he remains.
This implies you can't really fix someone else, can you? Unless they choose to fix themselves.
That's exactly his perspective. A strong person can't truly help a weaker one unless that weaker person is willing to do the necessary inner work themselves. Even then, the weak person has to ultimately become strong of themselves through their own effort, their own change in thinking. None but himself can alter his condition, Allen insists.
He even uses this lens to challenge some common ways of looking at social issues, like oppression.
He does. He notes the historical tendency to say, look, many people are slaves because one person is an oppressor, so let's hate the oppressor. But he also points out an increasing tendency for some to say the opposite. Well, one person is an oppressor because many are willing to be slaves, so let's despise the slaves.
What does Allen see as the deeper truth there?
He views both the oppressor and slave as fundamentally cooperators in ignorance. They seem to be hurting each other, but in reality they are both afflicting themselves through their own internal states of mind, their own ways of thinking.
So true understanding sees beyond that.
Perfect knowledge, he argues, sees the underlying law operating in both situations. Perfect love condemns neither side. Perfect compassion embraces both. The person who has genuinely conquered their own inner weakness and selfish thoughts is, in this view, truly free. They belong to neither category oppressor nor oppressed.
So all achievement, whether worldly or spiritual, requires this inner lifting of thought.
Always. A person can only rise, conquer, and achieve by lifting up his thoughts. You remain weak, stuck, miserable by refusing to do this necessary inner work.
Even for just, regular business success, material success.
Yes. Even for purely worldly achievement, he argues, you have to lift your thoughts above what he calls slavish animal indulgence. Now, you might not need to eliminate all self-interest right away for basic success, but you absolutely must sacrifice some portion of confused, base, animalistic thoughts and desires.
Oh, why is that necessary?
Because that kind of indulgence, he explains, prevents clear thinking. It stops you from planning carefully, developing your resources effectively, maintaining the self-control needed to manage complex affairs and responsibilities. Your level of achievement is limited only by the thoughts you choose to focus on and cultivate.
So sacrifice is fundamental. The higher the goal, the bigger the sacrifice.
He states it very plainly. There can be no progress, no achievement without sacrifice. Basic worldly success is achieved by sacrificing those confused animal thoughts and fixing your mind on practical plans, resolution, self-reliance. But the higher you lift your thoughts becoming more, say, manly, upright, righteous, the greater your success will be and the more blessed and lasting your achievements.
And he really believes the universe itself fundamentally favors the virtuous, even if it sometimes looks otherwise.
He insists on it. He says the universe does not favor the greedy, the dishonest, the vicious, even if surface appearances sometimes trick us. It truly helps the honest, the magnanimous, the virtuous. This, he says, isn't just his opinion, it's what the great teachers throughout history have declared.
And you prove it yourself.
You prove its truth for yourself by striving to become more virtuous, specifically by lifting up your thoughts.
And intellectual and spiritual achievements, same principle.
Exactly the same law applies. Intellectual achievement is the result of thought consecrated, dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge, or the beautiful and true. It's the outcome of long and arduous effort and of pure and unselfish thoughts.
And spiritual growth.
That, in his view, is the consummation of holy aspirations, the highest fulfillment of our most noble desires. Living consistently in noble, lofty, pure, unselfish thoughts leads surely, he believes, to becoming wise and noble yourself, and rising to a state of positive influence and deep blessedness.
So wrapping up this idea of achievement.
Across the board, any kind of achievement is the crown of effort, the diadem of thought. You climb higher through self-control, resolution, purity, righteousness, and well-directed thought. You fall lower through animality, laziness, impurity, corruption, and confused thinking.
And you have to stay vigilant to maintain success.
Yes, Allen adds that crucial point. Maintaining any victory requires constant watchfulness. Many people, he observes, fail and lose what they've gained after success seems certain because they relax their inner effort and let old, unhelpful thought habits creep back in.
So same law, different goals.
All achievements, business, intellectual, spiritual, result from definitely directed thought, governed by the same law, the same method. The only difference is the specific object you're aiming for. And he summarizes the sacrifice link very neatly. He who would accomplish little must sacrifice little. He who would achieve much must sacrifice much. He who would attain highly must sacrifice greatly.
This whole emphasis on lifting thoughts, on focusing purpose, seems like it has to be connected to holding some kind of higher image within us. What Alan talks about is visions and ideals.
Oh, absolutely. They're central.
Right.
Alan has this beautiful, almost poetic section where he calls the dreamers are the saviors of the world.
Saviors, how so?
He argues that the visible world, the world we see around us, is actually sustained by the invisible realm of ideals. Humanity, he says, is nourished by the beautiful visions of their solitary dreamers. We can't afford to forget our dreamers or let their ideals fade because we actually live in those ideals as the future realities we'll eventually experience.
You mean like the great artists, thinkers, prophets throughout history?
Exactly. The composer, the sculptor, the painter, the poet, the prophet, the sage, she calls them, the makers of the afterworld, the architects of heaven. The world is beautiful, he suggests, precisely because these people lived and relentlessly pursued their inner visions. Without them, he says, laboring humanity would kind of perish from lack of inspiration.
And if you, personally, hold on to such a vision or ideal, if you cherish it,
Alan makes a promise. If you cherish a beautiful vision, a lofty ideal in your heart, you will one day realize it. It will manifest.
he uses historical figures again, right? Columbus, Copernicus?
Yes, Columbus with his vision of another world, Copernicus envisioning multiple worlds, Buddha seeing a path to a spiritual world free from suffering. They held these powerful visions, and they ultimately realized them through their life and work.
So his message is to cherish our own inner visions.
He practically begs the reader. Cherish your visions, cherish your ideals, cherish the music that stirs in your heart, the beauty that forms in your mind, the loveliness that drapes your purest thoughts. Why? Because out of these inner treasures, he promises, will grow all delightful conditions, all heavenly environment. If you stay true to them, your outer world will eventually be built from that blueprint.
That's an incredibly empowering statement about the creative force of inner vision.
And he ties it right back to that fundamental law he keeps talking about. He says, quite simply, to desire is to obtain, to aspire is to achieve. This law means, he insists, that your purest aspirations will not be left to starve while your basest desires get fed. It really is, he suggests, as simple as ask and receive, if the asking is deep and true.
So the core message here really boils down to, as you dream, so shall you become.
That's exactly it. Your vision, he says, is the promise of what you can be. Your ideal is the prophecy of what you will become if you hold on to it. He reminds us that every great achievement was, at first, just a dream.
The oak and the acorn.
The oak and the acorn, the bird waits in the egg, and the waking angel, your highest potential, sleeps within the soul's highest vision. Dreams, he concludes beautifully, are the seedlings of realities.
What about when you're facing really difficult, uncongenial circumstances that seem to completely block your dream?
Alan's perspective is firm. Those circumstances will not long remain so uncongenial if you perceive a higher ideal within yourself and actively strive toward it. He states it as a kind of axiom. You cannot travel within and stand still without. Inner movement creates outer movement.
He gives that really detailed example of the young man.
Yes, the youth trapped in poverty, hard labor, an unhealthy workshop, no schooling.
But he has a dream inside.
He does. He dreams of better things, intelligence, refinement, grace, beauty. He starts to mentally build this ideal condition, this vision of wider liberty, and scope takes hold of him. An inner unrest pushes him to act. He uses whatever spare time and tiny means he has to develop his latent powers, his hidden abilities.
And as his mind changes,
As his mind gradually transforms, the external circumstances begin to shift. The workshop, now totally out of sync with his inner state, falls out of his life as easily as casting aside a garment, Alan writes. Opportunities start appearing that match his expanding inner powers. Years pass.
so
He becomes a master of his mental forces, wielding influence worldwide, holding great responsibilities, changing other people's lives. He literally realized the vision of his youth. He became one with his ideal.
and Alan says this principle applies to us, to the reader.
Yes, directly to you. You will realize the vision, not just an idle wish, but the deep vision of your heart. whether that vision is base or beautiful. You will always gravitate toward that which you secretly most love. You will receive the exact results of your own thoughts, exactly what you have earned internally. You will fall, stay stuck, or rise in life directly in line with your thoughts, your controlling vision, your dominant ideal. Ultimately, you become as small as your controlling desire, as great as your dominant aspiration.
He includes that quote from Stanton Kirkham Davis, too, which really captures this potential for transformation.
Yes, those incredibly evocative lines about someone keeping accounts who will suddenly walk out of the door, and shall find yourself before an audience. Or the person driving sheep who will wander to the city into the studio of the master. Or even laying down the saw and plane to take upon yourself the regeneration of the world. It's a powerful illustration drawn from Allen's source, showing that your current circumstances don't define your future when you're guided by a strong inner vision and directed effort.
And people who don't grasp this connection, this law between inner thought and outer reality,
Yeah,
they just see the surface. They call it life.
the thoughtless, the ignorant, the indolent, yes. Seeing someone who's become rich, they just say lucky. An intellectual, highly favored, a saintly person, they think chance aids him. They see the outcome, the light, the joy, the goal, the result, but they completely miss the underlying process.
The struggle behind it.
The trials, the failures, the struggles, the sacrifices, the relentless efforts, the unwavering faith that went into creating that result. They see the effect, but do not understand the process.
But Allen insists there's always a direct link between the effort and the result.
Absolutely. In human affairs, he states clearly, there are efforts and there are results, and the strength of the effort is the measure of the result. Chance is not. Gifts, powers, material possessions, spiritual attainment, all are, in this view, the fruits of effort. They are thoughts completed, objects accomplished, visions realized.
Which brings us right back to that core idea. Your inner vision, the ideal you hold dear, fundamentally shapes your life.
The vision that you glorify in your mind, the ideal that you enthrone in your heart, this you will build your life by, this you will become. It's a powerful closing statement for that section.
All this discussion, mastering thought, setting purpose, holding a vision, it feels like it's all building towards a particular state of being, doesn't it? Something profound.
It absolutely culminates for Allen in what he calls serenity. He describes calmness of mind as one of the beautiful jewels of wisdom.
And it's not something you just stumble upon. It takes work.
No, definitely not. He states very clearly it's the result of long and patient effort and self-control. It's a sign, an indication of ripened experience, and a deep, practical understanding of the laws of thought, how they actually work.
So understanding yourself, and by extension others, is the key to finding this calm.
Fundamentally, yes. You become calm as you gain understanding of yourself as what he calls a thought-evolved being. Seeing yourself that way naturally leads you to understand others in the same light. As you develop this right understanding, as you learn to see the internal relations of things by the action of cause and effect,
Seeing the connections.
seeing how everything is interconnected through these underlying principles, you naturally cease all the unnecessary fussing, fuming, worrying, and grieving. You learn how to remain poised, steadfast, serene.
And that inner calm has an effect outwards on the people around you.
A huge effect. A calm person, because they've learned to govern themselves, instinctively knows how to adapt to others more smoothly. Others tend to reverence their spiritual strength, Allen says. They feel they can learn from them, rely on them.
It even helps in practical ways.
Allen suggests that the more tranquil a person becomes, the greater their success, their influence, their power for good will be. He even notes that an ordinary trader's prosperity will increase if they cultivate self-control and equanimity, that steady composure, simply because people prefer dealing with someone who has a strongly equable demeanor.
So the strong, calm person becomes a source of stability for others, a refuge.
Yes, exactly. He says such a person is always loved and revered. They become like a shade-giving tree in a thirsty land or a sheltering rock in a storm. Allen includes this particularly beautiful passage describing serenity.
Read a bit of it.
Sure. He asks, who does not love a tranquil heart, a sweet-tempered, balanced life? That exquisite poise of character, which we call serenity, is the last lesson of culture, the fruitage of the soul. It is precious as wisdom, more to be desired than gold. How insignificant mere money-seeking looks in comparison with a serene life, a life that dwells in the ocean of truth, beneath the waves, beyond the reach of tempests and the eternal calm.
Wow. That paints a picture. And the contrast with a lack of self-control is pretty stark then.
He really highlights it. He asks us to just think about how many people sour their lives, how they ruin all that is sweet and beautiful by explosive tempers, how they destroy their poise of character and make bad blood.
Makes you wonder.
He poses the question directly. Don't the great majority of people essentially ruin their lives and their happiness precisely because of this lack of self-control? He notes how truly few people possess that genuinely well-balanced character, that exquisite poise.
Humanity often seems just tossed around by emotions, reactions.
It surges with uncontrolled passion, he writes. It's tumultuous with ungoverned grief. It's constantly blown about by anxiety and doubt. Allen concludes that only the wise person, only he whose thoughts are controlled and purified, has gained the inner mastery needed to make the winds and the storms of the soul obey him.
It sounds like a direct message to anyone feeling overwhelmed by life.
It really is. To those tempest-tossed souls, Allen offers this message of hope and clear direction. Know that in the ocean of life, the isles of blessedness are smiling, and the sunny shore of your ideal awaits your coming. It's there, reachable.
And the way to reach it is through this inner mastery, mastering thought.
Keep your hand firmly upon the helm of thought, he advises. He uses one final, really powerful image. In the bark of your soul reclines the commanding master. He does but sleep and wake him.
The power is already there.
The power to achieve this state of calm mastery is already within you. It just needs to be awakened, recognized, and directed consciously.
And the ultimate summary of what that mastery brings.
Self-control is strength. Right thought is mastery. Calmness is power. It's incredibly concise and potent. The final, simple, profound directive is to take command of your inner world. Say into your heart, peace, be still.
Well, that was quite a journey through James Allen's incredibly potent ideas, how intimately our thoughts connect to just every single part of our existence.
Yeah, our character, our circumstances, our physical health, our sense of purpose, what we achieve, the visions we hold.
And ultimately, our capacity for that deep inner peace, that serenity.
The core message, it's definitely challenging, no doubt about it, but it's also undeniably clear, and I think ultimately really empowering.
Right. It's this idea that you're not just, a product of external forces hitting you.
No, you're the architect, consciously or unconsciously, of your inner world.
And by tending that inner world,
You become the shaper of your outer experience.
it demands a lot of personal responsibility, doesn't it?
It really does. But in return, it highlights this just immense potential that lies within each of us to actually direct our own lives.
It puts the power back in your hands, essentially. Acknowledges the inner work is hard, but stresses the incredible possibilities it unlocks.
Exactly.
So maybe something for you to consider as you go about your day-to-day. Think about Alan's garden analogy. If the garden of your mind, right now, were suddenly visible for everyone to see,
What would they find?
what kind of blooms, what kind of weeds would they see growing there? And maybe more importantly, what might that reveal to you about where your focus, your mental energy, is truly being directed?